Okay, we are moving to the final story here, which is Joe Rogan. This clip went viral on Twitter, and it is a video clip of Joe Rogan. I think this is Bobby Lee. I think that's this guy's name. He's having a conversation about Israel and Gaza, and people are calling Joe Rogan out for it because all of a sudden Joe Rogan is trying to play dumb. So I was one of those people. I said, listen to Joe Rogan pretend that Israel and Gaza is complicated. Joe Rogan interviewed multiple guests on his show about this conflict. Now, all of a sudden, he says it's complicated and he's not an expert. Just admit you're afraid to criticize Israel, Joe. And I was actually surprised because this tweet received like 3.2K views. I was shocked by that, but let's get into this discussion here. Listen to this.
LA and, you know.
Oh, I hear you.
Yeah.
Look, it's a complicated issue.
It's so complicated.
And it's terrifying.
Yeah.
When you look at the video of when they do an overhead of what Gaza used to look like and what it looks like now. I mean.
So you heard what he said, right? It's a complicated issue. What did I tell you about that? When people say, oh, when it comes to Israel and Gaza, it's complicated. I told you before, that's a cop-out. It's not complicated. People can explain it to you in like 5 minutes. It's actually not. That's a way to not really actively criticize Israel. Just say that it's complicated. Okay, let's go on.
It's insane. It's fucking insane.
It's gonna take over a year to clean up just the rubble.
Oh my God.
But it's like 25,000 now?
At least.
At least.
They don't know how many people are dead. They have no idea. And just half the population is women and children.
And the trauma. And the fucking, famine. It's just, I just can't even comprehend it, really.
Yeah, and the Israelis tell you that it's necessary. And that they have to get rid of Hamas. And this is the way to do it.
But Joe Rogan knows this talking point. This has been explained to Joe Rogan multiple times on his show. And I'm sorry, I'm come back because I'm going to show you this clip in just a second. This was explained to Joe Rogan what was happening to the Palestinian people before the war even started, before October 7th. This is how I'm trying to tell you guys. I don't know if he's just afraid. I think he's afraid to criticize Israel. He does have this podcast on Spotify. He has a contract with them. I don't know if that's the thing, but we'll get there.
But just
I believe that. I believe that. I believe that maybe that should be, but I think the approach could be different.
Yeah.
Right? Well, I don't know.
I don't have any expertise in war.
Neither.
But I'm horrified that they can just shoot missiles into buildings. And they tell people to get out, but then they bomb the areas where they're going to. I mean, the whole thing's nuts, man. It's nuts, and it's so dangerous. It's so dangerous.
He said he's not an expert, right? You don't have to be an expert. I mean, no one's an expert on everything, right? But you don't really have to be an expert. Now I'm going to show you 2 clips here. The first one, you don't have to be an expert when you've had an expert on your show talk to you about this for 3 hours. And Abby Martin has been on Joe Rogan's show multiple times talking about this issue. Abby Martin's views on Israel. Listen to this. Again, this is before October 7th. This was 4 years ago. 4 years ago. Listen to this.
It's sick. I mean, you texted me that video of the kid, another medic was just shot. So
yeah, there was something that Bilal Muhammad, who's one of the UFC fighters, had on his Instagram. And I texted you that. It's so, again, this is another thing that's so difficult to understand what's actually going on. There's so many pro-Israel people that put their head in the sand and don't want to look at some of these atrocities and don't want to look at some of the videos that you sent me of soldiers shooting at people that are not doing anything.
That part right there. So there's Joe Rogan saying that Abby Martin had sent him videos of soldiers shooting at people who were not doing anything. Again, this was 4 years ago. So Joe Rogan knew exactly what was happening to the Palestinian people. Gaza and Israel wasn't at war then. There's more.
Right. I mean, their whole argument is that it's all Hamas and their human shields. I mean, we looked through hundreds of hours of footage that these people gave us, and it's mind-blowing footage. It looks absolutely cinematic and epic, but the footage is harrowing, and I didn't see one weapon. I didn't see one militant, not one weapon. It was literally people with slingshots throwing rocks at tanks. It's kind of a rite of passage. It's very symbolic. They're not trying to hurt anyone. No Israeli soldiers have been hurt or killed, during 2018, which is what the film looks at is through 2018 of the Great March of Return. And there's not any weapons. There's no militants. Hamas has nothing to do with the march. And
you hear this? So when Joe Rogan said in that other clip, he's like, but the Israelis say they have to do it. They got to get rid of Hamas. And here's Abby Martin on his show explaining to him in reference to the March of Return that part in all things had nothing to do with Hamas, but they were still killing the Palestinian people. So Joe Rogan knows, even if there are some Israelis that are making that statement, Joe Rogan knows the truth though.
And it's just shocking. I mean, it's shocking how many war crimes were committed on camera. And it's just amazing the propaganda that's just told to us about what this is and why they have the right to kill people that pose no threat to them.
When you were on last time and you talked about this, one of my email accounts was flooded with literally a chain letter, like the same letter, like denouncing you and your lies and your anti-Semitic perspective and your.
So you hear what he's saying? He said, when you were on my show last time and we talked about this. So like I told you, she has been on his show and discussed this with him multiple times. So I'm not saying Joe Rogan has to be an expert on this issue. He hasn't been an expert on a lot of issues, but that didn't stop him from voicing his opinion and standing for something in reference to it.
Anti-Israelis perspective. It was weird because it was the same email.
AstroTurfed. Yeah, it was fake.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a campaign. You
But
know
it came
that has a
from
lot of
hundreds.
money behind it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of money behind that. I mean,
Here's Abby Martin even talking about the money that's behind these things. You see this?
the film is mind-blowing. Go to GazaFightsForFreedom.com if you want to check it out when it gets released, and it's just really incontrovertible, Joe. I mean, even if it were a war between armies, all of these things that Israel has done are still documented war crimes and very grievous violations of international law. And we're talking about direct targeting and assassinations by Israeli snipers of disabled people, of children,
Medics.
press, and medics.
So here's Abby Martin telling Joe Rogan again 4 years ago about Israel war crimes. There was no October 7th at that point. It wasn't Hamas killed all these people at this festival, right?
And that's who Razan was. She was a medic, and as you mentioned, another medic just passed away, was killed, rather. I hate to use the passive voice because you always hear Palestinians died. No, they were murdered. They're all being murdered by snipers, and they pose no threat to them. And so the film looks at this UN investigation basically during the march in 2018 and documents all of the grievous crimes and atrocities conducted by the Israeli military. And I mean,
Yep.
Palestine has a right to defend itself. And this isn't even what that is. But if you look at the UN Charter of 1978, they say that, occupied peoples and besieged peoples have the right actually for armed self-defense. And the fact that this is not even what that is, that there's literally people going out there in peace with their bared chests, holding flags, and they're getting killed and sniped. There's so many amputations. I mean, just in 2018 alone, there was 35 kids who were killed.
You see this? You hear all this? Joy, that is a really good point. Joe ain't an expert about the jab, but he had no problems talking about that. Oh, Joy, you are so right. You are so right. Okay. So you see that, right? All right. Let me show you another one. Like I said, she's been on there multiple times. Here's another clip when Abby Martin was on Joe Rogan's show. This was 5 years ago. It's called What Does Israel Want?
What does Israel want? Like, as a state, like, what do they want from the Palestinians? What do they expect? They expect to just keep the status quo, keep business going as usual, never let those people live a normal life. Like, what do they want? And why do they have so much hate? And why haven't the Israeli people, like, seen the horrors of this and rebelled?
Why do they have so much hate? So this is Joe Rogan acknowledging that he knew the Israeli government hated the Palestinian people. Ooh, buddy.
Well, to be a leftist in Israel, it's difficult, and to be an anti-Zionist, it's even more difficult because you're rejecting your entire identity,
Your religion as well as your political identity.
But look, it's a settler colonial state, just like a lot of other things in the past. But this is different because it's ongoing, and ever since the inception of Israel to today, the colonizers who colonized that land always knew that there was an indigenous Arab population that they wanted to kill or expel. And
that part right there, Abby Martin explaining to Joe Rogan that even when they first colonized, they knew there was a Palestinian population that they wanted to expel. So Joe Rogan knows this is not just about what happened on October 7th. He's been told about this multiple times. He said he texted her and sent her videos. So if Joe Rogan was sending her videos and stuff like this, he was seeing these things himself as well. So he's very well aware.
that's still the goal. Like from Ben Gurion himself, the original, prime minister of Israel. I mean, he said there's so many Arabs here, we need to expel them and take their places. So it was never a land without a people and a people without a land. It was always overrun with Arabs, and they've always just wanted to expel the indigenous population so they can have an ethno-supremacist state. And that's really what it is. And that's
so. Can you be? I'm sorry to interrupt you, but can you be a Muslim and live in Israel? Can you be a Muslim and live in Jerusalem?
Yeah, but there's so many discriminatory laws that basically it's an apartheid state for non-Jews.
Like in what way? Like what are the laws that?
Here's Abby Martin telling Joe Rogan that it's an apartheid state.
I mean, there's so many things that people can check out, but I would really recommend the work of Miko Pilet and Ronnie Barkin. They're two anti-Zionist Israeli-born Jews who have extensively talked about this. But I mean, just in the roads, like there's settler-only roads compared to Palestinian.
Settler only.
Yeah, compared to Palestinian roads, people have different license plates. You have different ID cards.
So if you are a person
segregated schools, like just all that stuff.
So you can't go to a regular school?
No, you can, but it's so segregated and hostile, and you're so indoctrinated from an early age to basically hate these people and think of them as the other. And I encourage everyone to check out interviews that I did with just average Israelis in the streets, because the genocidal rhetoric is very apparent and it's very open. And these people were talking.
You hear all this? You guys hear all this? She was telling him back then about the genocidal rhetoric. Way before October 7th, 5 years ago.
Can play right now?
Sure. Yeah, check out Abby Martin, Israelis, candid interview with Israelis.
Did you have one opinion of that situation before you went there and then a different one after you came back?
Well, I didn't even know what Palestine was until I was 18 years old. So when people say, oh, you're only telling us one side of the story, look, I didn't know the Palestine side of the story until I was an adult, which really should say something about our education system and our media when you completely obfuscate an entire reality and are only told one side.
And I agree with that as well. It's the same thing for me. Growing up, I was told the Israeli side of the story. I was not told about the Palestinian side of the story. And she mentions the education system and the media. It's all captured. It's all captured. Who's writing these history books? Are Zionists writing the history textbooks? Who is in charge of the narrative in reference to mainstream media? Are Zionists behind that? I mean, AIPAC has his hands in Congress, but it's not just AIPAC. There are other organizations too that are Zionist organizations that control the narrative.
But before I went there, I had a conception of what it was, but once you go, you really see how much worse it is.
It says Israeli party approves annexation plan. Oh, sorry, I lost it.
Is this the yeah? So go to
coerce Palestinian departure.
So you can see even Joe Rogan is seeing this. Israeli party approves annexation plan to coerce Palestinian departure. Let me us to speed up just a little bit. There we go. This is when Abby Martin was there and she was on the street.
After this, keep going.
Interviewing people on the street, I should say, not like us on the street.
Keep going.
And what are you asking?
Okay, this is good too.
Okay.
So yeah, start playing here. This is the thing, and also the Stand With Us people in the Israeli lobby basically said, oh, you cherry pick these interviews, you only picked like genocidal people to talk to. What the hell are you talking about? I was in Jerusalem. There's a place called Tolerance Square. There's a bustling shopping area. I spoke to people from all backgrounds, all walks of life, and I just asked them very simple questions. What is it like to live here? How do you deal with the, problems? And basically they just were very, very readily comfortable to tell me very crazy genocidal things on camera, thinking that would actually look good for an American audience. So keep that in mind and check this out. A lot of people are sympathizing with the Palestinian plight. Can you talk about what it's like to kind of live in this situation?
First of all, it's very hard. I'm in an organization. It's called Lahava. It's against the Jews shouldn't marry Arabs.
Did you say the organization did what again?
The organization is, the thing of it is that Jews shouldn't marry Arabs.
Shouldn't marry Arabs. Yeah. Why do you feel strongly about that?
Because Jews is a special nation that God gave it to the Jews, and we don't want Jews to get mixed up together with a different nation.
I think.
So you hearing all this? Abby Martin has documentary. You hearing all this?
Israelis have to take over, and they have to kick them away. It will be much better not to kill them, just to go back to Arab countries.
As if they didn't live there.
Go back to Arab countries. When there were already Palestinians living in Palestine, but he wants them to leave. And there are several people. I don't know if you guys have seen this documentary that Abby Martin has done before, but she talks to a lot of people. And so Joe Rogan even heard that back then. They don't want the people there. Joe knows this.
These people, there's no need to try, there's no need to talk to them. What we can do is when they do enough harm, we retaliate. That's war, and that's the situation that any Jew who lives in Israel has to deal with.
Okay.
The Arabs made their name and memory be obliterated.
It's about to get really crazy.
We have to kill terrorists. They'd be afraid to cause us any more trouble, and all will be fine. They'll be in their villages, and we'll be here. We don't have to live together, and everything will be just fine.
You see? And that's him reading it. Now, you can see the rest of this if you want to see the full video. It's called Joe Rogan, What Does Israel Want? And that one is from 5 years ago, where Abby Martin explains to him the Israel-Palestine conflict. And all I have to say is this. So I don't know, who got to Joe. I don't know why in that discussion with Bobby Lee, he's pretending like he don't really know. And he's saying it's a complicated situation. She's been on his show multiple times, obviously going into great detail about these discussions. He said on the video that he's texted her videos about some of the things that he saw, yada, yada. He is very well aware. Very well aware. When I say we need more independent media and we need to educate the people, you know, a lot of us supported the fact that, you know, Joe Rogan should not be censored when they were threatening to remove him, or people were asking Spotify to remove him from the platform and stuff like that. A lot of us supported Joe Rogan, was like, no, like that's censorship, yada, yada. But my thing is, at the end of the day, Joe's still establishment. If you can't sit up here and criticize the state of Israel today, you know, you still establishment.